Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we have the after lunch slot, which is probably a pretty coveted spot, I would say, for the Innovators event. But I'm really excited to be here today, having a chat with Kheri. And I'll introduce myself first. My name is Jen Sposeto. I'm the Director of Marketing and Sales at Best Buy Ads. And Kheri, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So Kheri Tillman. So formally Vice President at Harman. And so just announced this week, I'm actually taking over as CMO of Blue Triton Brands, which are the old Nestle Waters brands, which have been slid over. So I'll be taking that over in a week. So, but today we'll spend a lot of time.
Yes, definitely a round of applause.
So today we'll spend a lot of time talking about Harman, because I can't really talk about the other brands yet because I haven't started. But bit of excitement, and hopefully we'll bring some of that learning with me there. So
yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Since we're coming off of lunch, I'll throw you an easy one first, Kheri. Okay, Harman, obviously an audio brand, audio brands, music. What was the first album you listened to, and what were you listening to it on?
Oh, okay. So my first album, which was 20 years ago? No. So I'd probably have to go all the way back to New Edition. Probably.
Ooh, okay.
And Candy Girl, I'm thinking, is probably the album that I was listening to at the time. I know it's a bit embarrassing, actually. So
No, I think we need to embrace our first albums. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. So within the Harman portfolio, House of Brands is how you described it. We know JBL to be the largest brand within that portfolio. And you mentioned to me that when you started, that was kind of the first brand you were working on bringing to life. And can you talk to us a little bit about that unique positioning behind the JBL brand?
Yes, so about 9 years ago, we came in and we said we really need to define what JBL is. So we spent a lot of time figuring out who was buying it, where we wanted to be positioned, what our heritage was behind the brand. I mean, it's a 75-year-old brand, so we had to take the time to step back and do that. At the time, so different generation, we were about amplified life, right? It was really about just, YOLO and embracing the moment and really getting out there. And so we recently actually had to step back because we're now in a new generation with Gen Z. Yeah. And what we realized is that for 75 years, we've amplified sound, and that's what JBL has done. But we realized there was an opportunity to do a bit more. And so what we started talking about is how we amplify voices. And how do we make voices heard? Because we know Gen Z is a generation that is a much more sort of aware generation. And we could own being more to them. And so we spent a lot of time figuring out how do we bring that piece to life? How do we work with the right people? How do we tell the right messaging to hopefully make people feel like their voices are important and that their voices deserve to be heard, and that's not only through music.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a part of that positioning, you talked about using partners and partnerships and influencers. And what I liked about the way you talked about that was you were really looking for a partner that you, JBL, could amplify their voice versus looking for a partner that's going to amplify the brand's voice. And one of those partners you mentioned to me that I got excited about was Doja Cat.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about how you landed on Doja Cat and what that experience has been like?
Yeah, and actually you said something that triggered. So when we first started 9 years ago, we actually partnered with the NBA. Again, we were about amplifying ourselves, amplifying experiences, and that partnership worked really well for us at that point in time and where we were with the evolution of the brand. When we looked at it again recently, we still partner with the NBA, or we partner with players and teams, because it is about how do you take people and amplify what they want to say. So as we were looking at it, Doja, this was now a year and a half ago, it was kind of unique, kind of up and coming. Now you feel like everybody knows who Doja is, but this was almost 2 years ago when we really started the conversations and trying to figure out how do we find people that are really authentically themselves, because that's what we want people to feel. If you want your voice to be heard, we want your real voice to be heard. And I don't know if anybody follows Doja on Instagram. She lets her real voice be heard very readily. And so we had a lot of great conversations with her team and then with her. And what we loved about it is, yes, she is authentically herself, but she also has a passion for what she wants to bring to life. And so she was a great partner in saying, hey, this is what I'd like to do. This is how I think JBL can help me do it, as opposed to, can you make this post post it on, on our Instagram site and let your 5 million people see it. Instead, she embraced it. She let us bling out a speaker that she put on the red carpet for the Grammys, and then went online. We had to actually prepare our executives because you don't quite know what you're going to get. And so a brand, which is a very corporate brand like JBL, to lean in and let's say, hey, I'm going to partner with Doja, who might say anything, and you don't know what she might say. And so she got on and she picked up her blinged out speaker and said, "Jibble, jibble, jibble," right? Which people called me, like, she called JBL Jibble. I'm like, she can call JBL whatever she wants. Like, she's in the 10 million followers, and the responses were amazing. Consumers loved it. Her consumers loved it. They were like, Jibble, JBL, I love it, right? And so it's about finding, right, the strength and the voice within the organization to embrace what you want to embrace with your Gen Z target, which are going to be two very different dynamics.
Yeah, and convincing executives that was the
that's
right
okay
thing to do.
Yeah.
I love that. One other partnership, I know we've talked a lot about partnerships, but I think they're very relevant right now, 100 Thieves. So for those people in the room who don't know 100 Thieves, will you tell us a little bit about them as a partner, and then what that kind of did for your gaming headphone business?
Yeah, so the way I think about 100 Thieves is they're a conglomerate of gamers, essentially, led by a few top gamers within the space. And JBL launched a new gaming headphone, and they're going actually into a broader line of gaming products. It's JBL Quantum headphones, and they use unique spatial sound. We really went back into sort of the experience of sound, surround sound, and things like that. But in launching, we are the 18th player in gaming headphones. How many gaming headphones are there out there, right? Yep. So we really needed to find a way to be relevant. And so having 100 Thieves as our partner to wear our headphones, to launch, we did a limited edition 100 Thieves, and again, a little bit with 100 Thieves, they do these product drops where they'll sell out, and then you'll see them online, and they'll sell sweatshirts for $200, $300 for people in resale. So we had them do a gaming headphone. We put 100 Thieves on it, and we sold, I think it was 200 headphones, and I think we sold them in about 10 minutes.
Wow.
And everybody said, wait, what? We did, how do we do that again? So it was finding people to help give us credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Really especially important for that audience, that you're going to need a really authentic entrance into that market.
And so that gave us a bit of that credibility. We've been able to claw back some share from some of the bigger players, and I can't remember the number, we're probably sitting in the top 4 or 5 spot now for an entry headphone, a new entry into the headphone market is a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, impressive. Let's shift gears a little bit, talk about JBL Fest. So recently, an in-person event in Vegas, yay, back to those. Tell us what led to the creation of JBL Fest and who that's really for.
So we started JBL Fest maybe 5 years ago, and it started off as a customer event, right? And so if anybody who's done a customer event, you're thinking about, okay, who's your audience? What do they want to experience? What do they want to see? And then we realized that we really wanted to make it bigger and have more impact. So we switched it and we made it a consumer event. We didn't do anything that was really targeted for our customers. But what we explained was we want to give them a view of what JBL does and how we act with our consumers, so that as they go away and they go back to their stores and they're going back to their locations, they can actually go, oh, I know how they bring JBL to life for their consumer, and I now have a better sense of how to replicate that. And so we did things like we had, it was at the Hard Rock at the time, which is now the Virgin Hotel, and it was a massive pool. But it had two levels. So we had our customers and our up higher. They could go down if they wanted to dare to jump into the rest of the fray, or they could experience it from afar. But I think allowing them to experience it and see it, really, they walked away being more brand evangelists than when they started. Yeah. And so the other thing that we did was we made it global. And so we allowed and asked the local markets to create programs that would send people to JBL Fest and give them that same experience. And so what you ended up creating was sort of these little brand evangelists that were able to go back into the market. And year over year, we've brought more and more micro influencers, where they're able to post, they're able to create their own content, and they're able to share what we're doing in a fairly sort of insular environment and really expose the rest of our consumers to it.
Yeah, using that micro influencer, and then of course Doja Cat at the event to
And then
amplify.
So we had Doja's last concert before she went into surgery, because she filmed a commercial with us. We filmed her concert for a commercial, and then we were her first concert after her surgery. So she was really excited to be back on stage. So it was fun to see her excitement and to be part of that, bringing her back out there.
Yeah, I love that shared strategy with the customer on both ends. What about the measuring the impact of in-person event? We're hearing a lot about performance marketing, return on ad spend, in-person events. How are you?
Are you one of my finance people?
Yes, secretly.
So no, it's actually a really interesting question, right? Because especially if you think about marketing, the question of how do you measure return on investment? So and in the definition, return on investment is for $1 spent, what do you get back, right? What dollar do you get back? And what we've worked to change the vernacular within marketing is we will get a return on investment, but we're not going to give you a dollar return. What we will tell you is what are the very specific KPIs on what we want to deliver, whether it's awareness, whether it's purchase intent, whether it's followers, whatever it may be. And we hold ourselves very tight to those. And we're not successful if we don't deliver against those.
Right.
But we're really clear now when a program should be one that drives volume, and there are marketing programs that drive volume, or it's a program that really is not tied to volume in any way, shape, or form, but it has very specific KPIs, and here's what those are. And so we've been successful in saying, so for JBL Fest, it was a lot about press, especially the first few years, again, trying to keep JBL and really work on its awareness. And then it's also conversation, and positive conversation have been where we've shifted over the past couple of years.
Yeah, that sentiment and measuring that. Right. It's important.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. I don't know if everyone in the room knows, but Kheri was behind one of my favorite campaigns during her time at Dos Equis. So the Most Interesting Man in the World campaign, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. I was really fascinated to hear that the catalyst behind that idea was actually one guy in a focus group said something that caught on. So will you tell everyone that story?
Yeah, so everybody hates focus groups, right? You sit behind the glass or you sit behind now the video and you're like, oh my God, I gotta watch this. For 4 hours, I gotta talk to consumers. This work was done before I got there. But they had a lot of focus groups around a bunch of different areas, and it's beer, so it was young males, 21 and over, clearly, and trying to understand how you could position a beer differently, right? We're bringing it over from Mexico. It didn't have high distribution, so it really could carve out its own space. And there was one person in one of the things that said, I go into bars and I just feel so stupid. I just don't want to be seen as boring. Right? The fear of being perceived as boring was really the impetus to the entire campaign. And it served as our North Star for the next 6 years, which is I want to be a brand that helps people feel more interesting. Yep. Right? The most interesting men in the world. All of the events that we didn't do a party. We did a party where you could learn how to, make a hawk fly. And we did a party where you could play an Olympic ping pong player or learn how to play the didgeridoo right? So there were all these things that whenever you went to Dos Equis events, consumers knew that they were going to walk away with some interesting story to tell or some conquest or something that they would be able to share that they did that they couldn't get anywhere else. And so one example is we were in Texas. We were throwing a party in the middle of nowhere. And we bussed people in from the 2 closest cities. And when they got through the gates, it wasn't a raging concert, but they could do a water slide, they could bungee jump, they could interact with animals. We said learning animal husbandry, and so what ended up getting posted and carried about was just this idea of like, oh my gosh, like no other brand does stuff like this, and so it was really perpetuating that idea of Dos Equis is a brand for those who want to live a more interesting life, and keeping that as the North Star allowed us to keep that campaign for a really long time.
Yeah, you mentioned it had a lot of legs. Can you talk about a little bit more of where you carried through that messaging from a marketing lens?
Yeah. So if we think about grocery,
Yeah.
right? It's sold in grocery. So how do you take this in bar, opportunity and bring it into grocery? So we had the most interesting recipes, and right. So we just found ways to keep interesting at the core of whatever it is that we were putting out there. And so we shippers and displays, whether it was interesting facts or interesting recipes or ways to do that. So we wanted to make sure that fell through kind of everything that we did.
Yeah. And how do you know when it's time for a campaign to end? How did you make that decision? Or
Yeah, so I did not make that decision. I fought every year for them not to cancel the campaign, and we did not. And then I think as people turn over in organizations, people kind of want to make their mark and do something new. Yep. I don't remember who made the decision. I wasn't there, but who made the decision to stop. But I do think, and what I think now is we as marketers tire of messaging, we tire of taglines, we tire of campaigns long before consumers do.
Absolutely.
And so I would fight tooth and nail to keep things. If your awareness is going up and consumers are having positive things to say about you, we don't necessarily have to be so quick to change something.
Yep.
And so I'm looking back in hindsight and whatever. I think they could have lasted longer with that idea of interesting. But I think for us now, we fought it at JBL. We have Dare to Listen as our tagline. And every year we're like, it's been there 9 years. Should we change that? No, why? It's okay. So I think just justifying and remembering why you put something in place and just checking to see if it still works versus saying I need to create something new is just a good thing to try to.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about that at Best Buy too. Are we in these four walls really sick of looking at this? Yeah, probably. But as long as we're reaching new customers,
absolutely,
and it's still relevant, why change what's working?
Absolutely,
that makes sense. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. The theme today is women in technology. We are obviously both are or have been women in technology. I'd love to hear your perspective about fostering the next generation of women in tech.
I think the first time that someone came to me and said women in tech, and I'm like, but I do marketing.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I think first came to what I really realized is that this idea of tech is so broad that you have to remember you can be in tech and not be an engineer. You can be in tech and not be, right? So there are other avenues into tech that are there, right? So I think we were laughing earlier, my dad was an engineer, my daughter's an engineer, I am not an engineer, right? So it skipped a generation, which is fine. But there are so many different roles that you can have, and I think being open to seeing that you don't have to be an engineer or you don't have to be tech savvy. You just have to be willing to learn, right? So yeah, I need to know how to wire a speaker now because when I walk in, I need to understand what a consumer is going to do, but I don't necessarily have to be the one to actually wire it, right? And so what we've done is we've really tried to reach out and do more with our internship program, do more with our, we have a college program that we work on, and we do that with general colleges and also HBCUs,
yeah.
And bringing people into the music space, which is also in many instances is also sort of in the tech space as well.
Absolutely.
And so really just trying to educate people of the opportunities that are there. And I think the more you realize you can switch, right? You can go from selling beer to selling technology, but you have to just know some of the core tenets of what's important about understanding your consumer or whatever it is that you do, you can bring that into a new industry and be successful doing it.
Yeah, tech does not have to be intimidating.
Right.
Absolutely. How about if you could go back and talk to yourself at the beginning of your career? What advice are you giving Kheri at the beginning of her career?
Oh, man. I don't know. It's funny as I think through my career, I've spent a lot of time at companies. I think I was at Kraft for maybe 8 years. I was at Heineken for 6 or 7 years, and I've been at Harman for 9, those are pretty long stints. Maybe too long. No, but I think something I would tell myself was something that someone told me, and I would say, like, make sure you're listening to them, which was, if you're still learning, you don't have to go anywhere, right? If you're still learning and growing, it's okay to stay where you are, and not run away, like, oh, I've been here too long, it's time for me to go. Versus, am I still, I always say, like, my arrows in my quiver, am I still, like, loading up that quiver for whatever that next job may be, so that whenever it is, I'm ready to go, as opposed to going too early. So I think that was advice that I got earlier that I would say definitely do that. But then I think it's also position yourself so that you are learning and being as broad as possible when you're in your career.
Yeah. I love that advice. I tell myself that all the time too. As long as I'm learning.
Keep learning.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to take a quick pause in case there are any questions. If there aren't any questions, I have lots more on my paper, but I want to make sure. Take a quick pause.
Any questions?
Okay, Kheri, let's keep going then.
Very good.
Okay. So yesterday at the Brand Innovators session, the theme was 2023 Outlook. From your point of view, 2023 will be the year of what?
Well, for me, a lot of change.
Yes.
I think I still think we are figuring out the impact that COVID has had.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, it's done. It's not, like, we fundamentally think differently now than we did before. We worry about things differently. And so I think it's really figuring out, how do we find, so from a workplace standpoint, how do you figure out this flexible work thing, right? I think Harman, we're now at 5 days a month. Some places are 3 days a week. How do you get people in at the same time? How do you create an environment, camaraderie within a company that people want to stay in if they're never there?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a year of kind of continuing to figure that piece out. And I think the embracing of events like this and being out and just being around people again, I think is going to be a big piece of I think everybody just feeling like we're getting closer to where we were before.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think everyone's kind of looking at what change has come out of the pandemic and what of that is going to stay.
What sticks, yeah.
Yeah. How do you think about that in terms of, like, we talked about fostering women in technology and the importance of flexible environment for women. I know some of the speakers earlier today were talking about that. How will you think about that in your new role in building your team?
Yeah, location is always big. And so the fact now that people can say, hey, you can work from anywhere. It's a dangerous statement.
Yeah.
To say that you can be fully remote. I do think there is something to be said for in-person communication. And my biggest fear is, especially for people who are just entering into the workforce, so our younger workforce, which all they know is Zoom, if they can make $10,000 more down the street and they're going to be on Zoom here and Zoom there, what keeps them Zoom here? Nothing, right? Nothing keeps it. If you think back to the last time you thought about, contemplated leaving your role, you were thinking, I kind of like the people here. I kind of like what I do. I could probably do that someplace else, but you know what? I'm gonna hang out. I'm gonna hang out a little bit more, and it's because of the people that you met and the relationships you have. So I think it's I think how we make sure we're driving that connection to the broader organization, whether they're local and remote, or remote because we've hired someone now in California, but we only have 2 people out there. What's the right conversation and cadence and in-person meetings so that you really continue to drive that? I think that's, for me, is a big concern on retaining talent and retaining your top talent because somebody else will want them, and you have to find ways to make them stay. So it's training and some other things, but I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about creating a culture. How are you going to create a culture, both for employees that are virtual, employees that are in the office, and what things about being in the office can truly translate virtually? And we found that there are some things that can't. You cannot always recreate in-person connection online, and that's just going to be a fact we're going to have to deal with.
Right. Metaverse or not.
We had to sneak metaverse in. Like, have you seen a panel that didn't sneak metaverse?
Metaverse or not, we have to be in person sometime. Yeah.
Okay, let's kind of close on a lighter note. So obviously you're making a career change now, but if you were going to stop doing anything brand or marketing related, what would the next career move be?
Oh my gosh. Wow. So So I'm a mom of three. So I have a 22-year-old, 20-year-old, and a 17-year-old, right? And so life revolves around still, even as they're older and out of the house. I have one collegiate athlete and one soon-to-be collegiate athlete. And so, full-time travel sports mom seems really exciting. I love that. But I think there are causes that I would love to really jump into. We've talked a little bit about lacrosse. There are a lot of sports, and sports can absolutely be an avenue into and through to education and life. I played soccer throughout up until about 2 years ago when I had knee surgery in a women's league, and I didn't realize until later in life that the skills you learn of how do I get Jen to pass me the ball there without saying, Jen, pass me the ball there because I don't want the rest of the team. So you learn these signals, these quiet. Some people need to be more yelled at, like, Jen, I need the ball. Other people are like, and that's enough, right? And so learning how you communicate with people. So I'd love to do more with the importance of sports and how it can be an avenue for learning, but then also getting into college. And there's so many sports that are very cost prohibitive. We were talking about lacrosse, and I traveled, what did I say, 8 weeks.
You had it calculated.
4,000 flying miles, 3,000 driving miles, all net. My daughter's now committed to play lacrosse in college, but man, I'm lucky I was able to take off from work and drive those miles and fly. So I think I would do a lot in my post-career around figuring out how we make that piece of it more accessible.
That sounds very exciting. And there's still time, Kheri. There's
still time.
There's still time.
I got to start this new job first, and then we'll be good to go.
We got a few things going on.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations again on the new role, and thanks for taking the time to chat with me today. Thanks to Brand Innovators for hosting and Paramount for the wonderful space, and thank you all for paying attention. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of the afternoon.
Great. Thank you.